Hey everybody, welcome back to another live episode with Seven Eagle Group. If you are new to our show or you're new to our channels or our social media page, we are a recruiting agency that is focused on finding meaningful employment for career transitioning military members, veterans, and their spouses and family members. Today we've got a really great guest on that's going to help bridge that gap and talk about the transition or the move between a military career and switching into a rewarding civilian career. So with us today, we have Dr. Dawn Graham, and she is a career switch coach, TEDx speaker, LinkedIn learning instructor, and former host of the popular call-in show, Dr. Dawn on Careers, which was on Sirius XM Radio, channel 132. She's also a regular contributor to the Forbes.com under the leadership channel and the former career director for the executive MBA program at the Wharton School, which is at the University of Pennsylvania. Her book, Switchers, How Smart Professionals Change Careers and See Success, which I highly recommend that you get, combines her experience as a career coach, licensed psychologist, and former corporate recruiter to give career switchers the strategies to break through obstacles and land that job they want. Welcome, Dr. Dawn Graham. We appreciate you coming on.
Thank you, Derek. I'm excited to be here. And I have to say, this is one of my favorite populations. And, I'd be remiss if I didn't say thank you for your service, but my dad was in the military, and I am honored to be here talking to your audience. So thanks for the invite.
Awesome. We appreciate you taking the time to do this. I know you got a busy schedule. So I guess let's start off with our audience right now. So we have people that are going to be listening that are transitioning out of active duty or from maybe an active reserve position or in the Guard, and they're trying to find that new job. Or maybe it's a veteran that's been out for a while. Maybe they're not so happy with where they're at, or maybe they decided to take a career break. And then, of course, we have their family members. So what's the first steps for a person that is making that transition? What is the most important thing that they should start doing, and how early should they start that process?
Yeah, no, great question. And I would say self-reflection. Often we start with everything external. We go on job boards, we look outside of ourselves, and we react to that. And I think that's one of the biggest mistakes people make, because when you're in a reactive mode, you're not really tapping into what do I want to do? You're tapping into more of an energy of what do I think I can do based on the skills I have. And the fact is, we know that so many skills are transferable, that there's a lot more options for each of us, in terms of what we're interested in terms of what we'd be good at, and in terms of where we can switch within our careers. And so step one is 100% looking at yourself and understanding your values, understanding what's important to you, understanding what you're willing to sacrifice and what you're not willing to sacrifice. And the question I love is, what problem do I want to solve in the market today? Because it takes you away from titles and industries and all of those boxes and labels that we tend to get so caught up in. And it really digs into what your energy and passion are telling you. What problem do I want to solve? And when you start with that question, then you can look at it from the inside out and say, okay, I'm really interested in these problems. Next step is I'm going to look at my skill set, what skills I have to move forward in this area, and what skills I might need to develop or acquire in order to get there. So I think that's a very important first step. And as much as we're very focused on distractions in the world, so I would recommend taking some quiet time and really focusing on answering some of those questions for yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that's an important step. And that last part there that you mentioned about what do I need to do to get to that? I think that's where a lot of career military people and veterans, they don't really take that into account. There's a lot of research that they need to do on their side to figure out, hey, once I figure out that problem that I want to solve, which is going to land me in this area, okay, what do I have to do to make myself relevant there?
Mhm.
Um, how once they identify that problem, let's say they get the certifications that they need or whatever it is that the background or training that they need for that, do you have any advice to give them? So obviously the military has its own group of words that it uses, its own vernacular, its own lexicon that it uses. And of course, even for our military spouses, they pick up on that and they'll start to talk just like their military member. How do they? So the military has one way of saying what value is, and obviously on the industry side, the hiring managers want to know how that like they have it in their mind. I want to hire a military person. I know there's value in doing this. They're going to be hard workers, but then they show up, the military member or the veteran shows up and they interview, and the value is lost in the translation. So do you have any tips or tricks or suggestions for somebody on how do they convey their value and translate their military value into that civilian value?
Yeah, and there's a lot to unpack in what you just said there, so I want to try and capture all of that. So first off, there's no right answer, and there's probably many answers. So I think as a first step, you have to pick one, right? And it doesn't have to be one for the rest of your life. It just needs to be what is the one I'm going to focus on right now? Because I think too many people get caught up in trying to cast a broad net, which intuitively seems like the right answer, but you can't be the answer for everything and everybody. So I think step one is really identifying a very clear, targeted, narrow next step so that you can rebrand yourself to appeal to that manager or appeal to that organization in that role. And so once you identify what that next step is, then you really need to understand your audience. What does the hiring manager want? And at the end of the day, I think we tend to get caught up in our heads around, I don't have this skill or I only have 5 years, but they want 8 years. And I would say, forget about that, because at the end of the day, a hiring manager or a leader really wants somebody who will get the job done, who will make them look good, and who will be responsible and show up and have an energy for that. So the rest can be taught. So get rid of adhering to every little checkbox on the job description, and ask yourself, do I believe I can show up and make this manager look good and do a good job and learn what I need to learn that I don't have in my background right now and be successful? If the answer is yes, then it comes to, how do I rebrand myself to use the language that the hiring manager wants to see? And this is for any switcher, definitely from military to civilian, but also from one industry to another or one function to another. And this is sometimes the hardest thing to do, because we as people get so tied to our labels, whether it's titles or acronyms from our where we work and things, and it's really hard for us to shed that. So this is where it can be helpful to get an objective party who can maybe point out, hey, that's not the common term that they use in this industry for that type of work. And so that's something that you can look at your resume, you can look at your LinkedIn, you can look at how you introduce yourself with titles, and really start stripping those labels out and focusing on the value you bring. What's your value proposition? What problem do you solve? And when you start doing that and stripping away the labels and titles, you'll start to see that there's really a lot of overlap between job to job or industry to industry. And when you can start to find that overlap and wipe away sort of that surface language, you'll start to realize that you actually are qualified for a lot more things than you may appear to be on your resume as it looks today.
Yeah, and I think that when you take that, it's important for those job seekers that are out there to also take into account that you may have a lot of organizations out there for military members. They'll produce like a master resume for you, but that's not the one that you're going to present to every single employer. You're going to take that information, you're going to tailor that directly to the specific job that you're applying for. And to do that, look at the job descriptions that's on there, what they're telling you they're looking for, and then figure out what do you have on your list that will match up with that. Maybe change those some keywords to match what they say. So that way it stands out more and it makes it easier for that recruiter that's looking through your resume to say, yep, this person does look like a good fit. So let's talk about when we talk about adding the value of it. Let's look at one of the biggest issues that we have with for our military spouse community. So they're probably looking at around a 43%, I believe, is what the average rate is now, unemployment. And one of the biggest issues that we see with that is, especially dealing with on the agency recruiting side of things, where when we talk to employers that well, we would like to hire veterans, we want to hire military spouses, but we're concerned that they're going to move
Hmm.
or there's a big gap in it. In a lot of cases, they have the qualifications, they have the experience, but it looks like they're a job hopper, and for some that can be a risk. What is some things that they can do? Or let's just say that they took a break. They married they their military spouse was young in their career. They started there, so they took a break during a certain amount of time or to raise their family. What are some tips or tricks for them, or some suggestions that you have for them to get back on it when they're and put themselves back out there and make themselves seen as a legitimate hire?
Yeah, and I think one of the things that we're going to benefit from is, the last few years, there's been a lot of people who probably have shorter term jobs on the resume, maybe even have gaps on the resume. And I think what has come out of this is that employers realize, maybe for the first time, that we're people, and people don't, start working at a certain age and have to work for the next 50 years without a gap, without a life experience, without picking a job that's not a fit. And I think we're looking at that differently now, and people expect that you're going to come in and in a short time have value. And so I think if you could show that you have had value in a short time, people are going to be more open to ignoring that. But even so, I think you're going to find more and more people are in jobs for less time, so that's going to be less of an issue. Obviously, right now the talent market is in favor of the job seekers, so a lot of companies aren't even worrying about that. But some things that you can do if you're concerned about that, first, I would say own it. A lot of people try and create a resume where they hide things and they're trying to pretend that this didn't exist. And I would say own it. If you had to leave for a personal reason, if had two jobs that didn't work out for some reason, I wouldn't say to lead off with that, but if you're asked about it, have a solid, confident answer as to what happened and how you resolved it, if that's the case. So I think that's first and foremost. Secondly, I would say, especially for military spouses, there's a lot of organizations that actually actively recruit this population and recognize the value that they bring to the workplace. So that could be another strategy. And then, of course, there's more and more remote positions coming up, or positions that might be hybrid, but in organizations that have offices in a variety of different locations. So those might be some different places that you can look, so that if you do have to move, perhaps that won't be as big of a deal to that company. So I think there are a lot of strategies. I think we've come a long way in the last few years. And what I would say is that owning it piece is a big deal, because you're going to find that a lot of the people who are interviewing you and the people you're working with probably have had a similar situation in their background and completely understand that, hey, we're humans and humans have complex lives.
Yeah. So obviously, remote work is COVID has fixed a lot, and it's really opened up the door of that. So just like my dogs decided that they needed to be heard on our conversation here. So when you, what's your opinion here on the future of work? Do you feel like it's going to be more and more towards the remote work? Because you see a lot. It seemed like it was headed that direction. It was becoming more accepted. Just like a lot of other things that as business evolves, society evolves, things are becoming more and more accepted because they were forced on us. But then you're starting to see where a lot of CEOs, a lot of employers are looking at, I want to get back to the normal that we used to have, and I want everybody back into the office. So what do you think the future is going to look like with that on the remote side of things?
Yeah, there's so much debate online, and I actually love reading about people's opinions and thoughts on this, because as much as this is probably not the answer anyone wants, it really depends. It depends because there are generational differences. There are certainly industry differences. There's going to be market differences in terms of, right now things might be in the employee's favor, but at some point the pendulum will swing and it'll be back in the employer's favor. I think one of the things that companies are really struggling with right now is how to manage hybrid employees and how to get people up to speed. more quickly when they join remotely, because there's definitely some research around the fact that when you're not in the office and kind of learning and absorbing, especially if you're a newer worker, that it can be more difficult to get up to speed quickly and be a contributing member. But again, depends on many things. I mean, there's a lot of work being done offshore now. And so the question becomes, as companies look to be more profitable, are there opportunities for them to get the same quality while using offshore talent? And which of those roles will be moved offshore? So I think there's a lot of factors to consider. So when people are thinking about their future and perhaps working from home or hybrid or what's going to work for them, I think they need to take a look at all of these things and say, what's the market right now? What industries are going to be moving in this direction? What industries are not going to be? I mean, there's obviously real estate concerns. There's so many facets of it that I think it's really difficult to predict. But it seems like for now, if you look at the jobs, many are landing in that hybrid space. And I think there are benefits to it. Certainly, there are benefits to remote. I mean, we see a lot more individuals with disabilities, for example. There's just an article on this, who have been able to get back to work because they can work from home. And so there's a lot of benefits for both sides, but we also see a lot of younger people who maybe build their community around their office, suffering because they don't have that. So it really is a very individual choice. And I think the great part about moving forward in the future is, whereas for the most part pre-pandemic it was just a given you were going to be in the office, I think now, as we consider our job choices and we consider what aligns with our values and where we are in our life, we can actually consider that there are enough remote positions that if that's something that's important to us, we can prioritize that.
Yeah, and that with the remote positions, especially for military members, when we partner with a company to find them talent, if their positions are remote, it vastly opens up the aperture for me to reach out to a lot more talented veterans, a lot more talented transitioning military members that I can put into those roles. Because yeah, they could relocate, and military members have a luxury of, the military will move them typically, depending on how they're leaving the military, retirement versus separation, to another location. But when that opportunity is remote, and if they're in that area and they've been there for several years or more, it's a lot easier for them to work with that company, and it gives them a lot bigger opportunity to match with and join up with the right talent.
Yeah, and it's just to tag on to that, it also, again, I think every aspect of this has pros and cons. It also increases the competition, which can make it more competitive to get a job. Certainly it can impact things like salary, but that's why I think it's such an individual choice. If you are at a place in your life or you're living a lifestyle that makes sense for you, then you may prioritize perhaps taking a lower salary or a different type of job so that you can stay remote. And I think that's the core of switchers. One of the things I talk a lot about in the book is that for every career, there's a trade-off, right? We'd all love to have the ideal job that's perfect and doesn't have anything we don't like about it, but there's always going to be something, whether you wish you made more money, or you wish the commute was different, or maybe don't like one of the core clients you have to work with. There's always going to be those things, but that's why the self-reflection piece is so important, because I think if going in, this is what's most important to me, this is what gives me the greatest satisfaction, whether that's teammates or the type of work or the urgency of the work or the ability to perhaps have variable comp, whatever that is, that energy is very personal to you. And I think that's what you need to seek out, regardless of whether it's remote or hybrid or what have you. So really good point.
Yeah, I think what you just said there is really important on that part of it. Is understanding what you want to do, in that self-reflection part. Is so as I was retiring out or starting out, I made that decision. Okay, this is it. I'm going to push the button. I'm going to apply for retirement. In the military, we're stuck there. I saw a post today that said that talked about leadership, and you can be leading people that can quit is different than leading people that are in the military. There used to be a time where you did what you were told, but now as society evolves, it's no different in the military. And leadership in the military, you'll get called out if you're a bad leader there. So you're right. The troops might not be able to quit, but they could probably get you fired. So, and get you moved out of that position. But as we, we're used to being told, hey, this is it. This is what you're going to do. Go do it. But now, as you really reflect on what you want to do, what problem you want to solve, as you put it, um, know that you don't have to apply for every company. And if it's not a fit for you, it's not a fit for you. You are evaluating as a job seeker that company just as much as the company's trying to evaluate you.
100%.
Um, and it's okay to pass
Hmm.
and move on to the next one. That recruiter is not going to, now, if it's an in-house recruiter, obviously, if you don't want to work for their company, then they're done with you. But on the agency side of it, hey, great, we'll put you back in the pool, and we'll see if there's another fit, and then we'll let you know. Or if you find something, let us know. So I think that's really important to understand, that not every company fits well with everybody, and we
Hmm.
have that ability to change and move around and to switch from one spot to the next based off of what really is important to us. So how about the process leading up to it, and we're identifying what we need to do, or where we want to belong, or where we want to fit in, what's important to us. From there, for a military member that has, in certain cases, there's a lot of jobs in the military that will plug directly into a particular industry on the outside. So, for example, pilots to pilots, aircraft mechanics to aircraft mechanics. And if they want to stay in those industries, they probably know somebody. The terminology is probably very similar for them. But when you have somebody that works in like the tech industry, that maybe what the military uses is completely different. What's something that they can do? What's something that they should start doing to get themselves ready and kind of acclimated into that system? Is there anything on LinkedIn that they can do, or any other platforms that they could be doing?
Yeah, and I know you asked me earlier, when should you start? And I think one of the benefits of being in the military is pretty far in advance that you're going to be making a transition, which is great because it is a lot of trial and error. Sometimes things that look great on the surface, when you dig in, you think, "Well, that's not really for me," or "I didn't realize that there was that piece of it, and that's not what I want to do." So I think one of the best things you can do is have conversations with people in the industries or in the functions that you are interested in. And I know that the military is amazing at networking. And if you reach out to somebody in the military who's in a position or in a role or in a company that you want to work for, 9 times out of 10, they're going to respond and say, "How can I help you? What do you need to know?"
Yeah.
And be very willing to share their experiences. And I know that could be a little daunting. I mean, I'm an introvert by nature, and reaching out to somebody who I don't know can be a little bit intimidating. But I think the thing that I always talk about is we have to start looking at the job search as more of a social process versus an individual isolated process, because it'll take you a lot longer to land a job if your primary strategy is sitting behind your computer and just kind of sending out resumes. But when you start to get out there and talk to people and hear their story and learn more about the company or learn more about their journey, you start to really understand, and then you're able to go back and look at your resume and your LinkedIn and your experience and reshape it into what a hiring manager will want. You will also get likely referrals, introductions to people who can make hiring decisions, and it starts to become a much more robust process. And I get that it feels a little vulnerable to share with somebody that you're looking for a job and you're asking them for help. But the reason I love the idea of it becoming a social process is because we know that most people will not stay in one job their entire career. So maybe it's my turn right now to ask you for help. Chances are you're going to come to me in a year or two, and I'm going to reciprocate that. So I think that's really how I would ideally envision the job search process being, much more social, much more engaged with people who have maybe come before you, because they can give you such great advice. And like you said, you have to be able to speak the language of the hiring manager. You have to be able to rebrand yourself um, in the word choices and content and what's important to that new person. And one of the things I know through coaching a lot of people in the military, some of the things that are amazing in the military and you've won awards for, which would most likely be the things that you would put forth, may not be of the top interest to the hiring manager. And that's the case not just in the military, but everywhere. If I'm changing industries, what was, I had a PhD in chemistry, but they want somebody who has business experience, and I lead with that PhD in chemistry. That got me where I am now, but it's not going to get me where I want to go. So it's really about saying, what are the most important things to my audience, not what are the most important things to where I am now, or the role I'm in now.
Yeah. So I think that's an important thing. So military members, I think that it's hard for us to sometimes talk about ourselves. And let me clarify on that. We'll talk about ourselves to each other like it's no tomorrow. But when it comes to the outside, that's when all of a sudden we become very quiet, and we don't. I don't really want to do that. I don't really want to stand out, because there's that imposter syndrome that kind of comes out of it, and we don't want to be that person who just is standing around and talking about themselves. But this is really a time where as you're building your future brand, and you're trying to network with different people. It's important that you're putting out there your thoughts, putting it down on through just creating content. And when I say that, I don't know, is it, on the content side of it, I think a lot of people think their mind immediately goes to, TikTok influencer or something like that. And that's not necessarily what it is. It can be something as simple as just you read somebody else's in your network's post and their content that they publish, and then thoughtfully interacting with that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything else that they can be doing on that end to help build themselves up, or to kind of trigger those referrals, that type of, hey, I've heard this guy, like I've seen what kind of information that they're putting out. I think you should take a chance on this person, or, hey, you know what? I like what you're saying. Let me introduce you to this person. Is there anything specific or anything that you can tell somebody that, hey, they are an introvert, but maybe start off small this way?
Yeah. So a couple of things in what you just said there. First off, I think a lot of people are less comfortable talking about themselves. Of course, what we see online on social media are the people who probably feel most comfortable. So we compare ourselves to them and say, wow, I couldn't do that. And the fact is, you don't need to do that. You need to be you. You need to be genuine to who you are, because you're going to be much more trustworthy and relatable if you are true to you. So you have to ask yourself, what feels comfortable to me? And for some people, they feel comfortable on LinkedIn because the platform creates an opportunity to, really list the things from your background in a pretty standard structured way. And if that's where you feel comfortable, that's great. Some people can share their expertise simply through asking questions. I've seen people get jobs purely because of the questions they ask. The questions are very insightful. The questions demonstrate their knowledge. So it's a very different way of saying, I know this and I've done this and I've done that. It's so you have to find what works for you. If you're comparing yourself to what people out on social media are doing, it's an automatic done, because comparison is one of the things that we can easily do to depress ourselves. But if you find that you tend to be more of an introvert, maybe you're better one-on-one than putting things out there on social media. So like you said, thoughtful comments on somebody else's work, sharing somebody else's work, applauding someone else's work. If you see something that is, somebody got a promotion, somebody put out a great article, sharing that can be the biggest compliment. So there's a lot of things you can do engaging social media without putting out there, hey, look at me, I've got all of this stuff. And when you find what's comfortable for you, you'll see that it works just as well as the people who are out there doing, TikTok dances and butter boards.
Yeah, so I think that's a good part, a good time for us to transition to probably the next thing that I think. So we talked a little bit about how to build up to the job search, figure out which way we're going to go, but how about the interview? You mentioned about about them asking questions. So I'm sure a lot of people. So typically, military members were used to maybe used to a promotion board or an awards board or something like that. It's very structured. You walk in, you're very very military in your movements and your actions, and then it's really just them. That board asking you questions, and you answering, and that's it. When they're done and they're done answering your questions, you're asking you those questions and you're done answering, you get up and you smartly move out of that room. So, what are some things that, because we military members don't have a lot of practice doing that, what are some things that they can do to prepare for that interview? And what's something that's important outside of the questions that are being able to explain their value to the questions being asked? Is there anything that they should be doing, like specific questions that they should be asking? Is it okay to ask questions at the end?
Mhm. Yeah, so a couple of things there. You mentioned the keyword practice. Most of us don't do that. And I can pretty much guarantee that all of us have this great dialogue going on in our minds. But when we actually go to say it out loud, it does not come out at all like that. So I would say, as uncomfortable as it is, find somebody, your spouse, a friend, that you can practice with. Worst case, videotape yourself and watch it back, because you'll start to see a lot of maybe your mannerisms or your filler words or things like that. So I think practice is key. Nobody's great at interviewing. And as a matter of fact, interviewing is a very different skill set, most likely, than the job you're going for. But it is an important one in the job search process. So one that you need to build up, and that takes practice. But a couple of things to think about who your audience is. Research your audience. People often say to me, "Oh, I don't want to look at somebody on LinkedIn because they'll think I'm stalking them." No, they don't think you're stalking them. They put that information out there for you to look at. So they expect you to get to know some things about them before you show up. And if you find some commonalities, then that might be a great icebreaker to start off and say, "Hey, I see we both follow this influencer," or "I see we both went to or lived in a similar town," or something like that. And that can really help establish the relationship right off the bat. So do look people up online and do know that they put things out there so that others can do that research. So that's a big one. And then, unfortunately, the process of hiring, we all like to think it's linear and logical, and it all makes sense, and we're going to know which questions we're going to ask, and it really isn't. We have to remember, a lot of hiring managers are not trained to interview. And this is not meant to be a slam on hiring managers. It's just the fact that they have a day job and it's not interviewing. So, what shows up on the day of your interview may not be what you expect, or what questions you get may not be what you prepared for. So, I think you have to go in knowing that yes, there are set, get to know the set of questions that tend to be standard. Do your best to review your resume, know yourself, know the job, know how your skills apply to the job, and then I always say, do the work for them. And what I mean by that is, know what information you want to leave on the table, regardless of the questions that they ask, because this way you will make sure you put the information out there that will give them the best ability to assess you for the job. So even if they ask questions you didn't expect, you have a couple of opportunities where you can relay that information. Usually the first question is one of them: "Tell me about yourself," or "Tell me about your background." This is a great place to make sure you have a succinct, clear answer that demonstrates your greatest value. And I would almost say, prepare for this question as if it's the only question you get to answer. Imagine if you only had that 2 minutes. What would you want to make sure you said in that 2 minutes? And that can be a great way to set the tone for the rest of the interview. So I say 100% get ready for that question. And then you also mentioned the questions that you ask at the end. This can be a great place to weave in expertise as well. First off, you always want to have questions. And what I tell people is, ask questions as if it's your first day on the job. So don't think about things like, how much money will I make, or, what types of training will I get, but think of, if it's the first day on the job, what kinds of questions would you be asking? And those questions might be things like, what do you expect of me in the first 3 months, or what does success look like? Or, who will I be working most closely with, and what do I need to know about that? So things like that are really company focused. And this is a great place to weave in your experience if you haven't had a chance to do it before, because you might say something like, "Well, I know one of the requirements for the job is, interacting with our Latin American colleagues, and I happen to speak Spanish." And then you go into your questions. So you can kind of weave in some additional information there. So those are some of the things you really want to be prepared for. But knowing that hiring managers are not always trained to interview, you don't know what you're going to get. So regardless of what you're going to get, if you prepare what you want to leave on the table, you're going to do a great job.
Yeah, absolutely, and I'm glad you said that, because you see a lot on different social media platforms about people complaining about the hiring experience. Now, there's certain things that can be controlled. Companies can educate hiring managers. On the recruiter side, recruiters, we need to make sure that we have good customer service with the candidates, and then also with our hiring managers. But it's important to know that that person that's interviewing you may have just, somebody might have walked down the hall and say, "Hey, Bob, I'm busy. Guess what? You're going to go do this." Or, you said you wanted to help out with something. This is what I need you to do. So I think that's really important to know, that sometimes they may just be as uncomfortable as you are sitting in that meeting, in that interview, because they're trying to figure out, well, what should I say next? So I do know that one question that I often tell people is, hey, ask them what gets them excited. I know I ask my recruiters to ask that of the hiring managers that they're dealing with. Explain to me what gets you excited to come to work every day. Because as a recruiter, it's important that I'm representing that company and speaking to that candidate with enthusiasm, because otherwise they're not going to want to come there or even try to apply.
Yeah, I love that question, because the other thing that it does is it taps into an emotion. And when you think about it, if you ask somebody what excites them and they tap into something that gives them satisfaction, they're automatically going to feel good, and they're going to associate that with you because you're in that conversation. So I think that's a great strategy.
Yeah, absolutely. So, great. Hey, I appreciate it. So tell everybody where we're kind of getting to that time where we're at optimal podcast links here for this thing. So tell everybody where they can connect with you, where they can pick up your book, and anything else there that they can find out more information about you and what you do as a career coach.
Yeah, absolutely. So my book is on Amazon. The paperback version just came out. So it's called Switchers: How Smart Professionals Change Careers and Seize Success. I also have a LinkedIn learning course on that as well. It's called Switching Your Career. So if you tend to be more of a video person, it has a lot of worksheets and questions and things of that nature. And then, of course, the best place to find me is LinkedIn. You can just type in my name, Dawn Graham, and you will find me pretty quickly. So I would hope that you reach out, let me know you saw the podcast, and definitely follow me. I'd love to be able to help you attain the career you're looking for.
Yeah. So when you say reach out, I think it's important when people are reaching out to add that personalized note, right?
Yes. Yes, I will tell you that makes all of the difference. And it doesn't have to be this well thought out, lengthy 10-minute process. It could just be something you saw on their profile. It could be, "Hey, Dawn, I saw you on the podcast. This point was really helpful. I'd love to connect." It could be something from their profile. "Hey, I see where we both went to the same school." I mean, but it is 100% something I would tell people to do, because it takes about 60 seconds, and it will make the difference between somebody clicking yes to connect with you and perhaps passing you over.
Yeah, absolutely. Awesome. Well, again, I really appreciate it. People check out the book. It is really great. Also, just a note that the LinkedIn, if you're a military member and you're with it and you're using that free year that LinkedIn provides you, you have that during that year, you have access to LinkedIn Learning. So you can take advantage of that online course, that LinkedIn course that Dr. Graham offers. So, Don, I appreciate you coming on. Thank you so much for supporting the military community, the veteran community, and our spouses. We appreciate all the work that you do, and and being an advocate for us, and sharing your thoughts and your expertise with us today.
Thank you, Derek. I've had a great time being here.
Awesome. Thank you. All right, guys, we'll see you on the next thing, on the next one next week. We appreciate it. We'll see you.